Namaste, you're on The Nation at 5. I'm Anand Narasimhan and we're coming to you live from the newsroom here at CNN News 18. We start with big developments coming through, ladies and gentlemen, which will have immediate ramifications on India too. And there are many levels and layers upon which this can be interpreted and looked at. But the big news is that Pakistan seems to be all ready to emerge out of the FATF grey listing. That's the big development that's coming through right now. Our investigations editor Manoj Gupta getting us these details that Pakistan is all set to exit the grey list where it has been languishing over the last 3 to 4 years. But it has served as serious impediment to its ability to try and raise funds, and it has also crippled the entire terror mechanism that's been operating out of the Pakistan atmosphere or ecosystem. But more importantly, it has had a severe dent. It has placed a severe dent on the machinations of the Pakistani establishment to bleed India with 1,000 cuts. So this will have immediate ramifications for Pakistan and also for India. What we have given to understand is that Pakistan has got the green signal for the FATF whitelist. Pakistan reportedly has complied with 40 FATF recommendations. There is an FATF meeting in Paris between the 18th to the 21st of October, and the MOS Foreign Affairs, Hina Rabbani Khar, will be attending that meeting. And Pakistan is likely to satisfy 11 critical conditions that have been set by the FATF. I have Sushant Sarinji joining us, Senior Fellow ORF and Strategic Affairs Expert. Sushantji, this is moving on expected lines, but there is also a hidden hand that is dealing these cards.
Yeah, Anand. In fact, there was a lot of speculation that Pakistan could come out of it, in part because, they have successfully fooled the international community, and partly because they've been playing victim, that, they are reeling under floods and what have you, and that, large costs have been imposed on them. But purely on objective criteria, while the Pakistanis might have taken some legal action, some, might have changed, at least on paper, the processes and procedures to prevent terror finance, to prevent money laundering. The fact of the matter remains that as far as the actual, financing of terrorism is concerned, it happens under the watchful eyes of the ISI. And there are banks like the Habib Bank and others. Habib Bank, incidentally, has been indicted in the US for terror finance. Habib Bank was also the bank. Do you remember there was a time when India was planning to open up some kind of banking? The Pakistanis had nominated the Habib Bank. Now, add 2 and 2, and you can figure out why Habib Bank. Because it's a bank which is notorious for its dealings with terrorists. And that is why it was being nominated out here. It was going to be the Pakistani bank in India. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But if you look at, the Pakistani approach, this is yet another eyewash action. Anand, these guys, they've tried to satisfy the West by imprisoning Hafiz Saeed, although I don't think he's in prison really. Because there are photographs of him in public rallies, although technically he's supposed to be in prison. Then they've said they don't know the whereabouts of Masood Azhar. They've tried to throw the Taliban under the bus by saying Masood Azhar has gone to Afghanistan. So they don't want to shuck up on Masood Azhar. They have arrested Sajid Mir, and this after proclaiming him dead and saying that he had been buried. So I think the West is either woke or so gullible or so stupid that it seems to have been taken in by the Pakistani, actions. Even though, Anand, let me tell you, the Asia Pacific Group report on Pakistan says that out of the 11 immediate outcomes, Pakistan has delivered only on 1. On 10 of those immediate outcomes, Pakistan's performance has not been satisfactory. And yet, if you are going to be taking them out of the FATF grey list and putting them back in the white list, then all I can say is that it's a travesty of the entire FATF process, which otherwise operates on very objective criteria, and actually had kept Pakistan, because Pakistan had tried to do this eyewash action earlier, and when the FATF inspectors had gone to Pakistan and started questioning the Pakistani authorities, they had found out that this was nothing but a complete game of deception. Apparently, this time they seem to have given in to Pakistan and all the kind of breast beating that the Pakistanis were doing,
Right.
making accusations and allegations that this is a very politically tainted process. Well, it is now seems to be a politically tainted process, but on the Pakistani side rather than against Pakistan, because on purely objective criteria, there is
Ji.
absolutely no reason to bring Pakistan out of the grey list.
Well, we've got access to the 11 conditions that were actually set. So CNN News 18 has accessed these 11 conditions that were set by the FATF and sources say that Pakistan is likely to successfully make a case of complying with all these 11 conditions. Our investigations editor Manoj Gupta getting us these details, and Sushant Sareen was only now mentioning that the FATF APAC, this region, had actually said that Pakistan had satisfied only one out of these 11 conditions. So what are these 11 conditions? Now, let's try and understand. Ensuring prevention of money laundering and terror financing. This is to ensure that will not that happens. Swift punishment of those involved in money laundering. Create checks to deter terror financing operations. Implement tough laws to end terror financing permanently. Arrest and identify assets of heads of banned organizations. Sanctions against banks linked to money laundering and terror. Prevent illegal fundraising by banned organizations. Highlight illegal foreign transactions to law enforcement. Identify all assets and operations of banned organizations, ensure strong laws for financial background checks, and ensure strong laws for financial records of suspected outfits. So Masood Azhar is in now Afghanistan. Ayman al-Zawahiri has been neutralized in Kabul. All terror organizations are now in Afghanistan. And those which are operating in Pakistan, I have got very, very legal and pliant fronts. So has Pakistan enacted this charade brilliantly, Sushant Sareenji, or is the West playing another double game?
Anand, I think the West is playing a double. Let me give you an example of this double game. According to the Pakistanis themselves, their election commission, after 8 years of investigating Imran Khan's records, financial records, have said that Imran Khan has engaged in money laundering. Right?
Right.
Now, you have the prime minister of that damn country who has been engaged in money laundering, and then you expect that the Pakistanis are going to set in place very tight and watertight kind of fail-safe money laundering standards. Are you now, either I'm a complete Charlie, or the West simply does not want to see the reality for what it is. Because how can a prime minister of a country be accused of money laundering by their own investigating agencies, and yet he gets away scot-free? Okay, the current prime minister has just been given a clean chit on charges of money laundering.
Correct.
All Pakistani politicians are involved in money laundering. On terror finance, please tell me what are the assets of terrorist organizations which have actually been seized of not just the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, but a number of other terrorist organizations which have cropped up in Pakistan. So, one can give you chapter and verse on how this whole process is taking place and how the Pakistanis are pretending that they are actually cracking down on all of this and delivering. But actually they are not. Because when it comes to actual terror finance and money laundering, yes, on the face of it, if you go to a bank today, you have to withdraw money or receive money, there'll be 20 forms to fill up. But none of those forms will be there once you take them out of the grey list. Number one. Number two, once you have taken this sword over the head, how are you going to force compliance on them? Correct. Number three, the biggest problem, that when it comes to state-sponsored terrorism which is sponsored by the Pakistani state against other countries, and I mean the ISI in specifically the ISI, when they are going to be involved in terrorist activities and they have to secure funding for these guys or launder money for these fellows, which bank is going to be able to stand up and say that no, you are violating the law? So yes, an ordinary citizen on the street will be made to jump through the hoops to show that you are complying with the FATF mandates and the FATF regulations. But when where it actually counts, these are guys who are going to go away scot-free. The entire
Right.
Pakistani real estate market operates on money laundering.
Well, yeah,
Now,
it is.
so what
But
world are we talking about?
For the Pakistanis, they've just turned around and said we are just into the import-export business of cash. So that's what Hamara export ka business hai, cash ka. That's what that's how they seem to be legitimizing it, and the West, largely led by Uncle Sam, seem to be buying it. Now we've got reaction from the Indian government sources also on this possibility. They're also keeping a close watch on the current situation, and what top Indian government sources are telling CNN News 18 at this point. There are reports of successful compliance of Pak, but this is all a complete whitewash. This is all bumkum. Terror camps and funding nexus still exist in Pakistan. FATF teams never visited terror breeding grounds in POK. Arrest of Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar chiefs only a photo op. Top terror commanders in ISI safe houses. And madrasas in Pakistan are being used to spread jihadi propaganda. So the Indian government source telling us what we already know and what the world knows. But Pakistanis were able to manage Sushant Sareen, getting the ambassador, the US ambassador to Pakistan, to go there and call it Azad Kashmir in POK, standing there, and put out a video of that. They have also been able to successfully shell this entire charade. They have legitimized the Haqqani as a terrorist outfit by putting them in government in Afghanistan. Did the trade-off, is this the biggest trade-off? The trade-off is that they gave up Zawahiri and they opened up their airspace for the American drones to fly to Kabul.
Well, at least on the face of it, that seems to be the trade-off. But I think there is an element of signaling from the American side to us that, okay, fine, since you are so interested in showing your strategic autonomy, let us shaft you a little bit and use the Pakistan angle. Perhaps there is that element which is also at play, number one. Number two, I think the Americans are also trying to, make up or at least have a working relationship going with the Pakistanis. Please remember that during the current floods, the Americans are the largest donors to Pakistan, despite the fact that the Pakistanis, have made them actually lose the war in Afghanistan. The Pakistanis were responsible for that, something that the Americans know very well, but seem rather diffident or reluctant or pusillanimous to be able to do anything about. So they seem to have accepted that. I think so. That relationship is not exactly going back to the old 50s and 60s kind of a relationship, but it serves as a good counterweight to India. So to that extent, the Americans are not averse to using the Pakistanis against India. Some of that might be also at play.
Is it also to try and wean Pakistan away from the Chinese a little, so that America still has a little bit of a foothold there to hold there?
Anand, that again is an American delusion if they think the Pakistanis are ever going to move away from the Chinese. But for the Americans, unless of course the Americans are so completely clueless that they don't know the meaning and the sentiment that will happen in India of seeing the American ambassador go to POK, unless they are completely insensitive to Indian concerns, I would imagine that was to a plan. That was to send a signal to us. And quite clearly, I think that is something which is also at play. And taking the Pakistanis out of the FATF grey list is probably yet another favor that the Americans are doing to the Pakistanis. Please remember...
Would you read all of it in conjunction, Sushantji? I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but because I want you to add this and also expand on it. The POJK remark, Azad Kashmir remark by the ambassador, the IMF extension of the dole, for the service and upgrade of the F-16s, and to say that it's like a counter-terrorism measure. Then this entire aspect of the FATF angle. Is Uncle Sam allowing Pakistan to be propped up yet again, despite knowing that it is the Pakistanis who ran America aground with respect to Afghanistan? And why would they want to do it?
I wouldn't say in entirety, but I would say to some extent I would go along with your take or the question which you are asking. I would go along it to some extent. I would go along with it that it does seem that the Americans are trying to pull them out of the kind of morass in which these guys are caught, in the hope of using them as a bit of a counterweight against India, number one. Number two, to use them for some counter-terrorism objectives which the Americans might have, and generally to keep the Pakistanis afloat. Keep them as a kind of a going concern. Because if the Pakistanis go under, then the Americans think that there will be a lot more cost to be paid than to keep them afloat somewhat. And the Pakistanis have their own wish list, which the Americans are giving into them. But I think just as what the Americans did in the last 20 years by turning a blind eye to what the Pakistanis were doing, I think they will end up paying a very heavy price for the flirtation with the Pakistanis this time around as well. I don't think they're going to come off, smelling of roses out of this one.
Or should we just go about our business and then, deal with it? Because it has hurt us, this American mollycoddling of the Pakistanis and doling out the dollars which have been directed towards India. And now when we are trying to push forth our growth story, do we want the Pakistanis energized with more dollars coming in, which they will again try and direct towards disrupting India? What should be our approach?
Anand, I believe Allah is great. And Allah will make sure that the Pakistanis will keep doing what they are doing and keep going down the hill. I think the trajectory on which they are, I don't see any way out for them. Unless, of course, the Americans are ready to give them about $100 billion or thereabouts. Pakistan is something of a bottomless pit. You can keep throwing money at it and that money will keep disappearing. Let me just